All right, in this lecture, we're going to be talking about how to properly scale things in perspective. So what this means is basically if you have something that is of a certain size and you move them further back towards your vanishing points, you want to make sure that they scale correctly, meaning that they get smaller the further back it goes, but you want to make the change in size be the correct proportions. So let me show you an example. Let's say, for example, that we have a human standing here. I'll just do a really simple shapes for a human. And let's say that they're standing next to a building. So let's say they have a building right here and it's moving off towards our vanishing point, right? And let's say that that's the first story of this building, so we can put a doorway right there. I know this looks really terrible, but it's just to get the concept across. So we have a doorway right there. This person could fit through that doorway just fine. But let's say that we have another building further down the street. So something like this. And this is the first story of that building. You have a door like that. And then let's say that we wanted to put a person across the street over here, but we didn't know how big to make them because we didn't know how to scale it, and we just kind of guesstimated or drew whatever we want. And let's say we made the person this small. Well, that might be a little bit too small, because if we look at how tall this person is compared to that door that they're standing next to, that person is a lot shorter compared to that door. And so this is what we're trying to avoid. We don't want this to happen. Or we also don't want to have somebody that's too big, but standing that far back. We want to make sure that they're the right height. And this applies to animals, objects, buildings, anything that you need to make sure that the scale looks the same throughout the entire image, no matter where they are located. So let's go ahead and let's actually start drawing this type of perspective. So let's start by drawing our horizon line. So draw a horizon line right through the center of the page. And then let's go ahead and find our vanishing point. So this is going to be 1 point perspective. And then what we want to do is we want to draw our first human as our reference. Our first human, wherever we put them on the page, is going to basically establish how large that person is. So let's go ahead and just draw a straight line like this. And then let's draw a straight line coming up like that. And that's going to be the width and the height of our person. We can go ahead and we can add a head to that. So let's actually make them a little bit taller, add a head there. So that represents their head. And let's say that this represents their feet. Just something like that. Nice and simple. Now, a way that we would be able to tell how big this person should be is, let's say they're standing in some sort of an environment. So we would place them next to something that we know the height of, or the relative height. So if we had a building drawn right here, for example, like we had before, and that's our doorway, let's say that's the first story, then we know that a human that size compared to a door, that's pretty good. That doesn't look weird. It's about the right height. And so we can base it off of things that are already in our environment. But then what if we want to put a person back here on the street? We need to make sure that we make them the right height and everything. So that's what this scaling is all about. So what we need to do is we need to measure the height of this person. And the way we do that is basically by drawing a line from the bottom of his feet back to the vanishing point, and from the vanishing point to the top of his head, like that. And so it's simple enough to understand that as long as this person stays on this guideline all the way back, if we bring him all the way back to here, he's going to be that tall. And that's pretty simple to understand. If we put him right there, he's going to be that tall. But what if we don't want him standing right here on this guideline? We don't want him to follow that exact plane. We want him to stand somewhere else. So let's say we want him to stand out here, for example, or we want him to stand here. Well, all we have to do is let's go ahead and first mark out where his feet are going to be. So we'll have him standing right about there. And then we just have to draw a line coming back over to our guideline like that. So they're touching. And then we can go ahead and draw a line coming straight up. So we know that that's now going to be the height of our person right there. So we can go ahead and translate that over by just connecting the top line all the way across like this. And then we can just go ahead and draw the same line that we have right here on this guy. And that's what we're drawing right here. And then we can go ahead and draw on the feet. We can go ahead and draw on the head, like that. And now that person is drawn with the correct scale. They've been scaled correctly. We can go ahead and erase these guidelines now. We don't need them anymore. But that's the basics of how to scale things. Anytime you want to scale somebody, you need to base it off of the scale of because usually there's going to be two things in your image that need to be scaled. So you need to base it off of one of those things. Otherwise, you won't be able to reference anything in your image. So let's try something else. Let's say that they're standing on a box. So let's go ahead and draw a box. So I'm going to draw a line coming off like that, a line coming off like this, and then I'll draw a line coming straight up, straight across, and I'll just draw this front surface of this box. And then I can go ahead and connect to that corner to create that top surface. And then let's go ahead and just erase this. All right, perfect. Next, what we need to do is we need to decide where a person is going to be standing. So I want them to stand further back on the box so that they become a little bit smaller because they'll be closer to that vanishing point. So I'm just going to draw the baseline for his feet like that. And then what we want to do is we want to do the same thing over here where we connected where we wanted our person to stand. We connected that back to our guideline. And so we want to do the same thing here, but since we're standing on a box, we can't just come directly across like that, because that would basically make them be standing behind the box. So what we want to do is we need to follow the form of the box. So we're going to basically take this line, draw it across like that, then draw it downwards like that. And then once we get down to ground level, we can draw all the way across and see where that touches on our guidelines. And so then we want to go ahead and draw a line up like this. And so now we know that that's going to be the height of our person up here on this box, because all of this is on one plane. Even though it looks like a zigzaggy line, it's actually all one plane. Kind of like if you can imagine that this was a wall. So what we need to do is we need to go ahead and take a lasso tool or some sort of tool that can cut this out. Your software should have something like this. We can go ahead and cut that out. And then we can go ahead and copy that or drag a copy of it off of it and just drag it up here and line the bottom of it up with the bottom of where our feet should be right there on that line that we drew. All right, great. So now we have the height of our person standing on that box. And all we have to do is just draw some feet in, draw a head in, like that. And now that person is properly scaled. Now this goes for anything. This goes for if you're drawing birds, animals, buildings, a ketchup bottle, anything. Anything that you need to make sure that you're properly scaling in your perspective, use this technique. Just make sure that you're basically using one version of it as your reference, and then using those perspective guidelines that are going back to your vanishing point. That's how you're going to scale it. So based off of this, if they're standing right here, then it's going to connect back to these guidelines and come up like that. And now you know that that right there is the height of the person or the object that you're drawing. All right, that brings us to the end of this lecture. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.